Never, ever let the truth get in the way of a good story. And when it comes to a really good action, war, adventure type of movie, never let real history take away from the good storytelling. That might be the lesson taken away from Mel Gibson and Heath Ledger, 2000's The Patriot. The Patriot with Mel Gibson is a film that has taken a lot of criticism for its various historical inaccuracies. Yes, there's always somebody that's upset about how slavery is portrayed, but when you're doing a movie like this, focusing on the slavery aspect just doesn't fit with the film. Yes, the British are treated as much more villainous in The Patriot than perhaps they are in real life, and terrible atrocities are depicted that are actually unknown to the historical record, which I'm sure the English aren't happy with that. I thought it was a little over the top myself, but then it is fiction. It is historically based fiction. We could talk a lot about the things that go wrong in Hollywood movies ever since there have been Hollywood movies about historical accuracy. Braveheart before this was no peach when it came to getting the details correct, but it was a great film. This film, set during the American Revolution, gets a lot of things wrong, but you kind of have to. It is a Mel Gibson movie. Mel Gibson becomes famous primarily among Americans with Mad Max and all of that. Lethal Weapon made him a household name, and when you look at Lethal Weapon and Braveheart and things up to and including The Patriot, the guy has a certain charisma about him that there's two sort of, the comedic roles he's done have been very good, but when you've got Mel Gibson as a psychopath, you want Mel Gibson as a psychopath. And I mean that sort of lovingly. When circumstances of tragedy, cruelty, crime done to his loved ones pushes him over the edge, and he does that almost incredible Hulk transformation where you see that he's about to go pathological on some people, it is really something. And that is sort of his forte in the action, adventure, war sort of sense. Within that genre, that's what he's known for. And so whether it's Lethal Weapon, where he's crazy, Braveheart, when the British kill his wife, now in The Patriot, where he tries so hard, very similar theme to Braveheart. He tries to not be pulled into the conflict, but terrible, horrible, criminal things are done to his loved ones, and finally he snaps and he goes all Lethal Weapon on people. It is a very, very entertaining movie because it is in that genre, just like Braveheart and others. It's very fun to watch. It's very emotionally compelling. And the details of the sets and the scenery, the historically accurate battle scenes, anyway, for the time period, I should say, the time period accuracy, this is a great, entertaining movie. The Patriot, however, the thing that I found most lacking in doing a film like this is I personally would have found it more satisfying if it hadn't been apparently sort of nuanced towards that whole Mel Gibson genre. The over-the-top burning of civilians at the church, unknown in actual history, giving us Tavington, supposed to be Tarleton from the real war, and overdoing the caricature of this person because you wanted someone that was villainous enough, ruthless enough, that you hated them enough that you couldn't wait for Mel Gibson to stick something through him or chop him up with that hatchet we kept seeing. This is perfectly wonderful cinema, as far as cinema goes. It really makes it feel is of that genre and not nearly as accurate in its historical narrative as it is in its sets and its scenery, so to speak. And that is the other problem, is we don't get what I felt like we were going to get and should get from a film set in this era, made by Americans and called The Patriot, We don't get a compelling story about why somebody should fight for the Patriot cause. We never really get a detailed explanation. We get barely hit upon, barely discussed, kind of glazed over notions of taxation and representation and what it is they're fighting for. I mean, ultimately, the Mel Gibson character, Martin, wants to stay out of the conflict, though he wants America to be independent in some sense, wants to stay out of the fighting, gets pulled in because of the tragedy, and the rest of it is sort of really a revenge story. He's getting vengeance and justice, and that cause is now linked to the cause of independence, but there's no real dive into what the details are of what America, what the colonies are fighting for. It just doesn't, it's not there. So it ends up being very much, it's the same story as Braveheart, moved to North America in a different century. And that's perfectly fine as a story that you can watch and you can enjoy. And it is very, very compellingly good action war movie, but and entertaining. But what I was hoping for in a little bit more real history, a little bit more discussion of what the cause was about, a little bit more even-handedness. They give us, it feels sort of forced, but they try to give us with Lord Cornwallis a little bit more of the gentlemanly, honorable Englishman, but they make him overwhelmingly kind of aristocratic. I don't know enough about him in real life to know, but they're clearly trying to drive the parallel between a society in which the monarchy and the elite rule versus what the colonies are aspiring to. But they do this all by giving us visuals that affect us now as an audience and affect us especially as Americans now as an audience, rather than a real discussion of values, principles, what's different now. We've been here for long enough that we need to be separate from the English. What are our values? How have those changed in the homeland? Why should we be sovereign? Thomas Paine, common sense. I mean, there's so many things that could have been added that, as much as it is an enjoyable, satisfying, and entertaining film with great visuals, great battle sequences, I would have hoped for something more historically detailed and accurate as to the actual cause, to really make it the annual event that it has sort of become for some people to watch it around the 4th of July. I've just watched it for the first time. I'd seen bits and pieces of it. I thought, well, today's a good day to watch it. It's got all these good qualities, and yet it could have been the go-to 4th of July patriotic holiday movie that talked about what America meant. And they really sort of skirt that, and that contributes to how they skirt the slavery thing and invent war atrocities and add in these details to make you really love the vengeance narrative more, but it ends up being less accurate. But overall, you can't beat Mel Gibson for, even in comedy, he's really good, but you can't beat a good psychopathic Mel Gibson. Then on revenge movie, Heath Ledger does well in it, and you talk about an ensemble cast, though there's not a lot of big actors in it. There's a lot of everybody. I mean, Rene Auberjonois from Deep Space Nine, seeing him play a patriotic good guy and a reverend, a pastor, which was really surreal because, well, not to speak ill of the dead, but the last couple of years before he died is when I discovered on Twitter and Instagram that Rene Auberjonois was completely batshit crazy on the political end, and profane and ugly and disgusting, and the things that he posted and called people. Seeing him be a reverend and a patriot fighting for the American cause was like, wow. So I guess he can act. He can act. But lots of parts and really lots of people, and everybody does well. And there's never a time when you're like, that wasn't right. There's a lot of foreshadowing. The imagery and cinematography are great. His younger son rushing into combat, getting shot against the British, and then you see he later, Mel Gibson, does that same look, and then we intentionally get the similarities in appearance that are sort of invented between him and Heath Ledger, but really work for be this father-son dynamic That's really artsy, thought out, well done, and well crafted sort of cinematography. This is really good storytelling. I just wish it had been telling us a slightly more real story and a slightly more nuanced one. But check it out. It is a great entertainment film. I'll probably watch it again on the next patriotic holiday. What did you think? The Patriot.